Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am the Diggity Doodah Doc, and we are here to talk Blackcaps cricket with Mr. Wobbly Wildcard, who has just watched the Champions League. So we'll talk through some Champions League matters, and then we'll get up to our next in Blackcaps World Cup cricket. They defeated Sri Lanka. Of course, if you want to support the Niche Cast and the Niche Case, jump on Patreon. That's the best way to do it. Otherwise, everything else involved, like shares, subscriptions, reviews, and all that stuff is welcome as always. Wildcard. While we were doing our little pre-podcast chat, I've got the Champions League on in the background right now, and they're doing their whole review thing. And I was watching Jurgen Klopp speak. And Liverpool, they won the Champions League 2-0 over Tottenham Hotspur. And I'm just wondering, what's Jurgen Klopp's involvement in all of this? He seems like one of the kind of undercover best coaches in the world. And he's a bit quirky, he's a bit different, but he's having success with Liverpool. How do you sum up his role in Liverpool being just a huge footballing factor now?
Yeah, I don't even know that he's undercover anymore. I think he's at that point where people think he is one of especially now having won the Champions League, because it was always the big criticism of him is that he gets to the final and then loses. And we need to overcome that hurdle, is to face another manager in the final who's never won a trophy. So going even further there. I mean, Klopp's got this bubbly personality and everyone loves him, and I think he's just in a world of football management where you get a lot of guys who are after their own skin. It's kind of a ruthless what would you call it, profession, and you get these Mourinho types and these career managers and stuff, and then you get someone like Klopp who just feels so genuine, and I think that bleeds into a lot of the belief and the confidence of his players, and he's always that dude who goes up there and he doesn't just pat his dudes on the back when they're subbed off, whatever. He goes up and gives them a hug. He whispers some sweet nothings in their ears and that kind of thing. So he's the sort of manager, I think, if he's the manager of your football team, he might as well be a saint to you. You'd worship him, you'd pray to him. If he's not the manager of your team, you're wondering why the hell he isn't, because pretty much okay, Man City, Pep Guardiola, different story there, but Manchester United, when Klopp was appointed, they had, I think David Moyes might have still been there, or it might have been after the first year of Van Gaal. Arsenal could have, if Arsene Wenger had left a year or two earlier, they could have had Jurgen Klopp, and I think he would have been perfect for Arsenal, although he's also perfect for Liverpool. Not 100% sure he would have been perfect for Man United, to be fair, but Chelsea go through managers every single year. They've just won a European trophy and are probably still going to lose their manager, because that's just what they do for Chelsea. And arguably, even Spurs, I wonder if Spurs might have been in a situation, although I think they're probably fairly happy with where they are, just because they're they're the new boys in that top six sort of crew. But yes, old Jurgen. I'm struggling to hide my disappointment, though, because it pains me inside whenever Liverpool win anything, Doc.
Sorry, I came out swinging with the positive Liverpool vibes.
I know.
Complete disregard for your disregard for Liverpool. But yeah, it's just been interesting. You mentioned a couple other managers there, and it was good to see Jose and Arsene sitting side by side.
I didn't watch a lot of that. Did they throttle each other at any point? Were there fisticuffs? Was there bloodshed?
No, very, very tranquilo. Very tranquilo. It was. It was very placid. But
that's because they're getting paid.
Yeah, they're professionals. They're good at what they do. Who was your favourite player from the final? Either team. Either leading into it, who were you like, this is my favourite player, or during the game, who were you like, this is the guy that just captures the wildcard's attention?
Well, after probably, certainly the best Champions League knockout phase that I can ever remember, with just so many absolute classic games, the final was a complete bore fest, and it didn't help that I was tired and just wishing I was still asleep through most of that, especially that first half. Liverpool scored after a minute and then led the entire rest of the way, and Spurs never looked like scoring. So I think my favourite player was probably the referee for blowing the final whistle and putting it out of his misery. But I mean, coming into the game, that like there is a big debate. I would assume it was pretty much right after the final whistle here, but I'm assuming there's going to be a big debate in the next couple of days over Harry Kane. And I love me some Harry Kane. He's a good old-fashioned, just English centre forward. Love the way that he plays. He's been injured for quite a while, a couple months out, and raced back to fitness to start this game, but you could tell he was off the pace, and Lucas Moura scored about the most dramatic hat-trick in the history of the Champions League that I can think of anyway. I'm sure some historian will correct me on that, but in the semi-final he scored that brilliant hat-trick to get past Ajax. Last goal with basically the last kick of the game right at the end there in stoppage time, and then he was dropped for the final, so it's a little bit unceremonious there. And to be honest, I thought once Moura came on they looked a little bit better, so it was the closest Spurs got to looking like they could maybe threaten. But there's got to be a question now of whether Harry Kane was fit enough to play as often as he did, or whether maybe it would have been better off starting Moura, push Son Heung-min up front, bring Kane on for the last 20-30 minutes just for a real burst. I think that's what I expected to happen. I didn't think he'd play 60-70 minutes, but I don't know. So I think Harry Kane's situation in that game is probably going to be the big talking point, but I'm not sure it would have made a massive difference because Spurs they still don't really have a midfield. I don't think Dele Alli was very good. Son Heung-min tried hard, but didn't have a lot of space to work in. Like, I think that on the whole, they just weren't at the level that they were to get here. And yeah, I don't know, it wasn't easy. I don't think it helped that the final had like a 3-week break between the end of the season and this, and some of the players almost looked tired, like it almost lost a bit of match fitness in that time. So I don't think that helped. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. This bloody Champions League, bloody Liverpool.
What was your major talking point from the Blackcaps defeating Sri Lanka?
What talking points are there? It's as good a win as they could have, right? I mean, they came out there on a nasty-looking green wicket, won the toss. That was pretty important. Bowled first, bowled them out, smacked down the runs with no real pressure on them. So we've been talking about their lack of preparation, and we sort of also been talking about how, in a way, that's clouded by the fact that the draws worked out quite nicely for them, where they play 3 subcontinent teams who are expected to beat first up. Afghanistan aren't a subcontinent team, but they're close enough in their style of cricket. So I think they've almost got these 3 games to ease into the tournament, and the selection issues didn't matter because Southey and Nichols were both out with minor little issues. So Latham was good to go as well, and kept well, didn't have to bat. There almost weren't that many talking points. I don't know. What did you take from that?
It's more of a general World Cup sort of angle about how there's so many variables from game to game, and like just with this game started at 10:30 a.m. England time, and so if you're giving the Blackcaps bowling attack a 10:30 a.m. start against a subcontinent team on a pitch that by all accounts apparently averages the most degrees of seam movement of all the World Cup pitches, like that's just a cauldron of delectable Blackcap seam bowling. There's no worse situation for a Sri Lankan batsman to find themselves in. You might as well find yourself in New Zealand, because that's what the Blackcaps got in their first game day. I think their next 2 games are day-nighters, so it might have you're going to have a different set of conditions against the. We have to wait and see what the difference is between Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, but if the Blackcaps find themselves on such pitches, they're going to be pretty damn good, regardless of whether it's Matt Henry or Tim Southey or Lockie Ferguson or Tim Southey. Like, however you want to split that seam attack up, they're going to be pretty dangerous in these conditions, but you're not going to have these game conditions, so playing a team like Sri Lanka, the start time, the pitch conditions, I don't know how that's going to be, like how often the Blackcaps will get that, and that's their challenge, is how they move between the different conditions, because we've seen a few different. I've been impressed by the role bowling has played in the World Cup. I love how bowling has been a major talking point, whether it's the short stuff that the West Indies bowled to counter Pakistan, or the Blackcaps seam bowling. Jofra Archer from the England game, like, he's bowling real fast and he was just too good. So I like how bowling has played a huge role in these opening games as well, which is good for New Zealand.
Yeah, it's very good for New Zealand because all that talk about the 350 plus scores we were in for, and England started off all right on that note, but England have been doing that every single game against whoever they play, and since then, I mean, you got three games, 3 first innings teams bowled out pretty cheaply, haven't you? Like Pakistan got skittled by the Windies, Sri Lanka skittled by New Zealand, and who's the other one? Afghanistan skittled by Australia. So it's really, it's been the opposite of what we were told to expect, wasn't it? But I guess I think as we get deeper into the tournament, I think things will steady out a little bit more. It's nice. It's a nice way to start, isn't it? It's a nice way to ease in. I don't think the Blackcaps could have done anything better in that game. They played to their maximum potential, but we do have to keep in mind that it was, as you say, very favourable conditions in a number of ways. Even just playing Sri Lanka in that game was pretty favourable, because Sri Lanka, their cricket team's not in the best state at the moment, and like their captain was made captain at a point where he hadn't even played an ODI for 4 years since the last World Cup. So yeah, there's some extraneous circumstances there beyond the Blackcaps' control, but they, everything that was in their control, they did nicely. Do you think that Colin Munro and Matt Henry, the two guys in the most, the most discussion about their places in the team, whether Munro should open ahead of Nicholls or vice versa, whether Southey should be in or Matt Henry? I think if both guys had been fit, I suspect that Nicholls, maybe Nicholls and Munro might have both had a place in the team, but I think Nicholls certainly would have been in there, and I'm pretty sure Southey would have been in ahead of Henry as well. So it was a good opportunity for those two, and very safe to say they both rose to the occasion. Munro with a not out 50. I can't remember the last time he scored a 50. And then Matt Henry getting a few very important wickets early on to really begin the whole innings and get New Zealand on the front foot from the start. So do you think they've I don't want to say locked down a spot for the next couple games, but they certainly must have done their chances pretty well, no harm, that's for sure, eh?
Now we are getting into the meat and veg of this game, as they say, wildcard, because I want to preface kind of what you said by when you said you mentioned Matt Henry as a player who is in the selection mix situation. I want to add Lockie Ferguson to that, because whether Tim Southey comes back or not it depends on Lockie Ferguson and Matt Henry, and Matt Henry got player of the day today, but Lockie Ferguson also took 3 wickets, same amount of wickets, fewer overs, fewer deliveries, better RPO. So Lockie Ferguson was equally, if not more impressive than Matt Henry, kinda, and especially I wrote about this in the review, the movement of Lockie Ferguson swinging it into right-handers. If Lockie Ferguson's doing that, he could be very dangerous throughout the World Cup, but that's a very unique, green pitch, overcast conditions. Lockie Ferguson being at the peak of his powers, that's when you get that in-swing to the right-handers. Otherwise, Lockie Ferguson's bowling really fast, bouncing, slower balls, change up, all of that, and that's what makes him effective. But if he's moving the ball away from left-handers into right-handers at 150 Ks, it's a different challenge. And going into the World Cup, Lockie Ferguson may have been in the same conversation as Henry. Great start by Lockie Ferguson. Low-key as impressive, if not more impressive than Matt Henry. So I think it's still now it's a bit more focused on Matt Henry, Tim Southey, as opposed to Lockie Ferguson, because Lockie Ferguson's been pretty damn good for a while now. And I've just got all these memories of watching the scorecards from Plunkett Shield and Lockie Ferguson just steaming in, hooping the ball into right-handers at 150 Ks. For a Plunkett Shield batsman, that's a difficult challenge. So if Lockie Ferguson can do that, he's going to be a breakout star of the World Cup. And yeah, so I said this was the meat and veg, and it's definitely, I'm chewing through this meat at this stage. The Henry Nicholls situation could be very interesting, wildcard, and I just want to get your idea on this quickly. Is the Blackcaps didn't play Henry Nicholls, and if you're looking at the bowling attack that enables them, so you've got Jimmy Neesham and de Grandhomme and Mitchell Santner. You can play with Matt Henry or Tim Southey with Lockie Ferguson and Trent Boult. That's a pretty stacked, maybe not stacked with world-class bowlers, but stacked with bowling options. And you can do that because you didn't play Henry Nicholls. So if Henry Nicholls comes into the team, he's coming into the team for either to open, which is a straight-out swap with Munro, but I'll get into Munro after we chew through this meat for a little bit. So that means he's more likely to come in for Jimmy Neesham, de Grandhomme, or Mitchell Santner, or even Matt Henry or Lockie Ferguson. Who knows? One of the bowlers. But point being that if you bring in Henry Nicholls into the middle order, you're going to have to lose one of the bowlers. And I think Henry Nicholls will come back. But if you're coming in on these pitches, green pitches, and you can kind of assess conditions leading into the game, sometimes it may be more favourable to come out with a stacked seam bowling option. So how do you view Henry Nicholls fitting in here, Wildcat?
Well, I had a thought during that game, and like watching Guptill and Munro chase down those runs. And the thing about that is, like, Guptill hit a couple nice pull shots early on, and Munro hit just a typically, like, Colin Munro style six, just clobbered over cow corner, exactly what you want to see from him at his best. And then they sort of just got into the grind of chewing down those runs and working their way towards victory. And I kind of felt like, apart from a couple of those nice early shots, they didn't actually bat that well. Like, there were a lot of mishits and edges that, like, through a vacant slipcourt and balls hit in the air but not to a fielder and things like that. And I don't think it was a vintage performance from Guptill or Munro by any means, like, not even close to it, which made me wonder, like, if you're up against a better bowling attack, like a bowling attack that had more than just Suranga Lakmal and nothing else, I don't know that they're getting anywhere near what they did there. I don't think it was the most impressive, like, 137 run chase that I've ever seen. That's for sure. So I almost wondered watching that if there is a situation here where maybe we pick Colin Munro against the teams we're expected to beat, and maybe we pick Henry Nicholls against the teams where you need a little more craft and guile in order to build an innings against, you know, more talented bowlers. And Nicholls just doesn't give you the power that Munro offers, and he's not going to score anywhere near at a similar run rate, but he is a little sturdier. So yeah, like, that's what I got wondering about that whole situation. If it was up to me, I think I'd have Nicholls as the opener ahead of Colin Munro still. Just there's too many grains of salt you got to take with that win over Sri Lanka. But yeah, I wonder if that isn't quite a useful situation there, where maybe that's how, like, they'd do that. I think they did do that with, like, there was obviously the option of having an extra all-rounder, probably de Grandhomme, or maybe picking the second spinner with Sodhi. But looking at that pitch, like, one little glimpse of that pitch showed you exactly what you needed. That thing was greener than the field that the footy ferns played on at the same time, and where were they? In Brighton. So, like, of course you're gonna pick the extra seamer there. So if you're gonna do that with the bowling attack, why not have that open-mindedness with the batting lineup as well? Like, just pick Munro for the games where you think he's going to be able to get in and belt a few, and pick Nicholls for the ones when you need a little bit more calmness there. What do you reckon? Am I onto something?
Could be, but you're basically saying Munro's too shit to play against the good teams. Like that's
But I'm also saying that he's a flat track bully. He'll cash in against the weaker ones, and that's not necessarily the worst thing to be.
yeah, I know. I'm just thinking like if you're Colin Munro, you're basically being told.
Yeah, I know.
But with how net run rate and all that stuff applies in a World Cup format,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cashing in has a different connotation because it could be the difference between fourth and fifth.
I wouldn't even say could be. I think it will be the difference.
Yeah.
Like we were looking at some of the what a win total will be to make the semi-final. I think it might be a team or two that get 8 or 7 wins, but I reckon there's easily a chance where we get like 4 or 5 teams in that 5-6 win range, and that's net run rate is everything, and we've got up to a great start with that. I think we're in the 5s or something like that. Like New Zealand and the West Indies both got big wins and really put themselves in a healthy situation going forward, but it only takes one bad loss to undo that, so you want to cash in when you can.
Correct. I will swing back around to Colin Munro, but you mentioned the taking this game with a grain of salt, and I try to stay clear of that idea just because I've done a bit of soul searching, and I was very maybe negative about the Blackcaps, but that's based on a lot of substance and facts, and I'm not regretting that at all. It's definitely what I think is going to hold the Blackcaps from performing at their very optimum best. So I didn't want to come out and say Sri Lanka aren't very good, but the truth is Sri Lanka aren't very good. I'm watching Lasith Malinga right now with a little gut coming in, bowling 129 Ks. Like this is Sri Lanka. There's
he's not what he used to be. I
was listening to Jeremy Coney on the Test Match Special, and he's talking about Sri Lanka not selecting guys like Chandimal, guys like Dickwella. Dickwella came to Aotearoa over the summer and just crunched it to all parts. He was class. He was a good batsman. And you're not even selecting these guys. Sri Lanka, just aren't. They're not at the level of the Blackcaps, South Africa, Pakistan, who are on the level just below from the opening exchanges of this World Cup: West Indies, Australia, India, England. So Sri Lanka, you do have to. Like these Sri Lankan batsmen just weren't able to deal with enough movement. It wasn't hooping around. It wasn't, seaming dramatically. But Sri Lanka just couldn't deal with any seam movement. So, you do need to take it with a grain of salt, but we're building into the World Cup, alluding back to the draw of the World Cup in games against Bangladesh, then Afghanistan. That's good for the Blackcaps. They get to ease it. With regards to Munro, he is definitely the type of guy who is going to score that score at that stage of the World Cup. And what that means moving forward, as you basically alluded to, who knows? I'm not any more confident that Munro is going to be a huge factor in this World Cup because of this game, although you seem to like the idea of Henry Nicholls opening more than I do. I think with Colin Munro, just keep him in there and just tell him to try and just whack everything. Although he did, to counter your idea that their batting wasn't amazing, they had Munro on the ICC. Like the ICC YouTube content is really good for the World Cup, so check out a lot of that, a lot of interviews and post-game interviews and all sorts of fantastic stuff. Colin Munro talked to Ian Smith and the other lady, and he was saying that he was a bit more... I think the vibe was that he's like reflected on the New Zealand summer a bit, and he mentioned the New Zealand summer. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was taking it one ball at a time. He said he was like getting too far ahead of himself in the game, and now he's just focusing on one ball at a time, which is standard cliche stuff. But it was nice to hear a bit of reflection from Munro, and I think in England, in what I believe will be the status quo, you're not going to have green seamers as the status quo. You're going to have pitches that are more conducive to Colin Munro hitting sixes. And he did it on a green seamer against a mediocre bowling attack. And he could do it on a flat pitch against a decent attack. Maybe 1 out of every 3 innings, and that might be the way to go. But you mentioned what Munro has done. I tweeted it the other day about Colin Munro's lead into the World Cup. We talked about it. Colin Munro hasn't been in fantastic form, and his last 50-plus score for the Blackcaps in ODI cricket came against Sri Lanka last summer. So Colin Munro tends to score big against Sri Lanka, as you've mentioned, a flat-track bully, and then it's like sporadic. He was going really well end of 2017, start of 2018, but since January 2018, that's his next half century in ODI cricket. So this was his third since January 16th, 2018, and two have come against Sri Lanka. Make of that like what you will.
Sounds like Neil Broom against Bangladesh, doesn't it?
It sure does. Do you prefer... Yeah, because I just think if Henry Nicholls is an opening, I'm kind of open to the makeup of this Blackcaps team.
Well, where would you go if Nicholls is batting? I mean, you can slide him in at 6 and have Neesham / de Grandhomme at 7, but I don't know, how would you balance that? Because I think that might actually be what they do. I wonder if they just want a little bit of something extra in the batting lineup. And I don't know that Neesham and de Grandhomme are... I think it's a luxury to have both of them. So I think probably de Grandhomme would slip out of it. De Grandhomme is a better bowler than Jimmy Neesham, but Jimmy Neesham does offer a little bit of variety with the ball, and I trust his batting more in that he can bat at a couple different tempos. So I think that's where I would lean with this, but I don't know. What do you reckon on that situation? Would you have Nicholls, if Nicholls isn't opening, would you have him in the team? And if so, who are you squeezing out to make room for him?
I think that's it's hugely dependent on conditions. And even that, knowing what we know about Nicholls and his quality to this point as a cricketer, it's pretty rough to leave him out of the Blackcaps team.
Especially for an opener who went a year without scoring a 50.
Precisely, but if you're coming up on a seaming deck and you want that kind of bowling attack that the Blackcaps can offer, you might want to go this route, and that may be the option. You may have to leave out Nicholls. I just don't like the other thing is there's going to be a lot of selection changes from game to game, I believe, because you're going to have what I just said, pretty much the conditions directing how you're thinking, and we may get the alternative, like maybe some of the pitches may be a bit drier, which means spin bowling becomes a factor, and maybe the Blackcaps are watching... let me just pull this up, wildcard, because a little bit interesting here. The best spin bowler from this opening weekend, so a lot of guys haven't played yet, and pretty much anyone who has played has only played one game, so it's crazy to mention this, but Adam Zampa's the best spin bowler. He's a leggy. Next best spin bowler, Imran Tahir. He's a leggy. And then you've got Adil Rashid from England. Wasn't overly hot in their first game. Didn't need to be. He's a leggy. And Rashid Khan from Afghanistan. He's also a leggy. And I think... I'll just check this when you're jibber-jabbering yourself. I think Pakistan have Shadab Khan, who is also a leggy. I'll just find that out. But point being that the two best spinners so far from the opening games have been leggies, which obviously means that we've had heaps of seam bowlers taken, Adam Zampa's got 3 wickets, averaging 20, and then there are 8 bowlers ahead of him. They're all seam bowlers, which is pretty cool for the World Cup and the bowling resistance. But
bowling resistance, I like that.
I think leg spin is going to be a factor. So how does, like, if you're playing on a flat pitch, I think Mitchell Santner is going to get rolled. Like, if you're coming up on the status quo kind of conditions that I think we're going to get in England throughout the World Cup, I think Mitchell Santner might be targeted.
Yeah, I think Sodhi would get targeted too, though, at the same time. It's just a matter of, like, the fact that he can spin the ball both ways and get a bit more turn than Santner does. You're probably more likely to get that miss-hit that floats up in the air for a wicket sort of thing. And with a leg spinner, like, you see this with all those leg spinners you just mentioned. Captains will take that. Captains will take, like, the risk of going for, giving up 12 runs in an over if there's a possibility of buying a wicket from it. And none more so than Faf du Plessis for South Africa, who chucked on Imran Tahir to open the bowling against England, and he got Johnny Bairstow out first ball. So, I mean, it doesn't work any better than that. Then, with England a little bit rattled, he then gave Tahir a second over, which was a very smart idea. But then, as Joe Root hit a couple beauty cover drives to get himself going, and then he made the criminal mistake of giving his surprise bowler a third over when it was no longer a surprise, and Tahir got pumped. So, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky balance. Shows that interesting. I like the outside of the box thinking. Of course, opening with spinners at World Cup, something New Zealand's a little bit famous for going back in the day. So, yeah, I guess if you've got a leggy, and most teams do seem to have a leggy, it's almost this. Actually, you said this the other day on the podcast, didn't you? Like, it's less about the quality of the leg spinner in question and more about how they're used and the opportunities they get. So that has always been my concern with how Sodhi's been used for the Blackcaps. Is I never really feel like he's been used in the best situations, just because we've never had a dominant leg spinner in New Zealand. I can't think of a decent leg spinner that New Zealand's ever had before. Not someone who can actually get proper turn. So it's like field placements that don't protect the bowler, and then these kind of things. And Sodhi hasn't always been his own. He hasn't always put himself in the best position with some of his accuracy at times. And I just think this is all a bit of a tricky situation from a number of matters. But yeah, I think I said last time I want to see 2 spinners in this team if the opportunity arises. Was disappointed when I saw the line-up against Sri Lanka and saw that there wasn't 2 spinners, and then I saw the wicket and understood exactly why. So yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having a mostly consistent 11. I think you want 8 or 9 of those players locked in every game, and if you can, just time after time, keep the same soldiers working. But I'm also I don't like rotation for the sake of rotation, but if it's rotation based on conditions, based on a game plan, I couldn't encourage it more. So that's definitely one to watch out for.
If Ish Sodhi's being targeted, I think it's very beneficial to Ish Sodhi, because that puts him in T20 mode, and that means that batsmen are trying to score off him. He spins ball both ways, and you got to be good enough to middle a lot of those shots, which I think Ish Sodhi's a lot easier to handle when you can sit on him for a bit more time and then wait for Ish Sodhi to bowl the bad ball. Whereas if you're trying to attack every Ish Sodhi ball, you're going to find yourself in trouble. But if the Blackcaps are playing on flat pitches, I think the middle stages could pose a few niggly little issues, because you're going to have Colin de Grandhomme bowling. If he has to bowl during the middle stages, if the innings is 50 overs, I should say, Colin de Grandhomme's going to bowl at least 4 overs. Flat pitch, that could be very expensive. Jimmy Neesham on a flat pitch, what's he going to offer against good batsmen? Mitchell Santner, as I just said, I reckon could get targeted. And, Matt Henry does have a habit, as good as he has been, as his record suggests. Like, I'm thinking back to that Australian series in Australia, where Matt Henry was very expensive in the later stages, I think, and which I actually think was Lockie Ferguson's kind of ODI debut series.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
Is Matt Henry going to be a factor when the ball's not moving? That's a huge question, because he doesn't have like a lot else. At least Lockie Ferguson can bowl 150 Ks and bowl Yorkers, slower balls, bounces. Matt Henry on a flat pitch against England, Matt Henry may just turn into a you got hard balls as well. You got 2 new balls. England, they're just going to go at him. So I'm just interested in how this bowling group, with a lack of X factor, can handle the better teams on flatter pitches, and that's where I think Ishodi comes in, because when Ishodi's bowling through the middle stages, he's taking wickets, and I'm trying to put the whole preparation stuff out of my mind at this point, but I've absorbed a lot of content about England, learning about England, as I've mentioned here many times, but I think Adil Rashid, and I've heard him being interviewed, and he's just like, my job is just to take wickets. Moeen Ali, his job and his skill set is designed to slow down the run rate. I am trying to take wickets. I'm trying to be an attacking weapon. That's my job. That's what my captain picks me for. I know that 100%. If Ishodi is in that mould, in that zone, then he's so much more of a factor, but that's where all the preparation stuff falls away, because Ishodi hasn't been given that job. He hasn't been selected consistently enough. But I think there is a role like that through the middle stages for the Blackcaps that needs to be filled when the ball isn't seaming, swinging. You need someone to come in the middle stages and pick up wickets to stop the run rate.
Yeah, and Matt Henry also isn't a guy you can trust at the death of, the death bowling as well. So it's, yeah. But I mean, I still don't think if we were on a flat deck against England, I don't think Matt Henry would be playing. I think Tim Southee would be playing ahead of him even after Henry looked decent against Sri Lanka. Like, there's just, I guess my main worry from that first game, and it's a small one because it was a pretty overwhelmingly just like lovely performance from the Blackcaps. My main worry is that maybe a couple of those top performances, because of all the circumstances we're talking about, Sri Lanka not being at their best with conditions being so favourable to New Zealand, like, I just hope there aren't too many overreactions where, like, oh, Matt Henry got a couple wickets, so he's locked on for the rest of the tournament sort of thing. And sorry, Timmy, sorry about that. Because I think Tim Southee's still got a fair bit to offer. I know his last couple years in ODI cricket have not been anywhere near flash, but I do back him to rise to the occasion at a World Cup if he gets a decent gig, and I think just seniority tends to be a big factor with the Blackcaps in recent years, so I do reckon he slides back in once he's good to go. The Nicholls one is obviously much more of a situation. Yeah, well, I guess we see how that goes. What have you thought of some of these other games, like, from the World Cup? Are there any, just before we finish, are there any, like, wider perspectives you've taken? Pakistan don't like short bowling, we learned that. I already knew from the warm-up series a couple of weeks ago that Jofra Archer is something special, but very much enjoy watching him bowl. Like, you're picking up many learnings from these other teams, scouting mission efforts here?
Not overly, because a lot of these games have been lopsided, so it's hard to, like, I can't really talk too much about West Indies because it may be a similar situation to, like, if Pakistan are going to implode as they can, you just got to put it down to a Pakistani implosion, because who knows how they're going to show up in the next game. You can't say that the West Indies are an amazing team because they came up against a Pakistani implosion. What West Indies do have is a pretty impressive team, though. Like, those dudes
they really do.
But this World Cup presents different situations and challenges, because you're looking at this West Indies team. Chris Gayle had a sore back while he was batting. Andre Russell did a knee or an ankle or something. And then in that review show on the ICC YouTube, they joked about him limping over to the interview, and Mark Nicholas, the geezer that he is, started feeling up Andre Russell's knee, and he's like, that knee's a bit swollen, isn't it? He's fucking grabbing his knee. It was pretty weird, but point being that Andre Russell's knee is an issue. And the bigger point here is that the West Indies, they're a very big team. Can they sustain the level of fitness, the level of energy required to perform throughout the World Cup? Because you're playing 10 games over a month, and if that, and you're going to have to be fit and healthy to be competing at the later stage of the World Cup. So, yeah, West Indies look very good. Fast bowling, big hitting, just classy team, and it's great for cricket that West Indies have come together, and it'll probably last till the end of the World Cup, and then we'll be back to whatever the status quo there is. But then you've got the fact, how's their health and fitness, what's your recovery systems like. My team to watch out for is Australia. I just think Australia have the best team, and obviously England are the favourites still, but Australia, I think they're just going to play hard every game. They might not go out and smash heaps of runs, but I don't think they're a team who's going to get rolled cheaply, so you're going to have to, they would rather work the ball around, they would rather bully the other team, but not do it in a boundary hitting way. Just be like, yo, we're in control of the game here, and that doesn't lead to cheap wickets. And I think it's just going to be a tough team to break down, and they're going to break you down. So I think Australia's a team to watch, and also South Africa, who weren't very good in their opening game against England. I reckon if they can get a bit of momentum, they could be another team to watch out for.
Yeah, with South Africa, I think it's like Dale Steyn didn't play that first game, so whether he can come back and be a major factor, whether he can be the Dale Steyn of old, I think is pretty important for them. They've got an interesting team because they've got Kagesa Rabada, for example, borderline the best young fast bowler on the planet, but they've also got guys like Amla and Steyn himself, and a couple of these guys who are obviously in their last World Cup, and you got guys they've got a sort of weird mix where they're a bit like old and young, and I'm not massively sure about the balance of that team, but obviously the talent is good enough for them to make a decent run. I think Australia are going to win it. I think Australia they've almost slid under the radar a bit, but I look at that team and I see Warner coming back and Smith coming back, and I look at what I think is the best seam bowling attack in this competition, and I don't even know that it's massively close. Actually, New Zealand have a half-decent one, or maybe we would be the next best challengers there. And yeah, I look at them though, and I see that same annoying Australian mentality where they're just going to find a way to win. And like you said, they're tough to beat. They're not going to get broken down easy. And when you come to those, they obviously got the talent to make it to the semi-finals, and I think they will. And then once you get to the semi-finals, must-win cricket, they just got the experience and the know-how and that really useful kind of arrogance almost, where they're going to win those games, and I'm worried about it, because they don't feel like a team to look at them that should be. You look at some of the Aussie World Champion teams of the past, and you go, yeah, that's a World Cup winning team. You don't necessarily get that vibe from this team, but I think they sort of sneakily do have that, just maybe not as obvious as in the past.
Fantastic. Well, okay, we'll wrap it up there. We've done 40 minutes talking about the Blackcaps and cricket, so I'm looking forward to this Cricket World Cup and dropping gems like we've just dropped for the last 40 minutes. We will be back soon enough for the next episode of the Niche Cast, and Yeah, enjoy your Queen's birthday weekend. Shout out to the Queen for being the Queen.
It's not even her real birthday.